Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli the Computer Guy, and in today's class, I'm going to show you how to use the ChatGPT API. This is not a class for normies. This is a class for the geeks. So a lot of folks out there, when they start talking about ChatGPT, they go to chatgpt.com or whatever it is. They have a nice little text box there. They type out their question or their prompts, right? And they get a response back from ChatGPT, and they say, yeah, I know how to use AI. And people like me look at those folks and go like, okay, good for you. You can enter things into a text box and read what the response is. That is just wonderful. But here's the thing, right? If you are going to be a technology professional, if you're really going to try to extract the most value out of things like AI as possible, you do not want to be using the user interfaces that normies are using, right? If you sit down and you type out your question and you get a nice pretty response from the ChatGPT platform, that is simply not going to cut it if you're going to be creating your own systems, right? So what I'm going to be showing you how to do today is use what's called the API. So we're going to use Python. So Python is an interpreted programming language. We're going to use Python to query ChatGPT with a question, give some requirements and that type of thing, and then actually get a response back from that API. And with that response, we'll be able to do any number of things. So for Silicon Dojo, when I do the in-person hands-on classes, we've done a lot of stuff with ChatGPT. So we've done things like web scraping, actually going to websites, scraping the text from the websites and auto-summarizing, doing that type of thing. You're able to automatically create blog posts and actually have that dumped directly into the database. So imagine if you simply typed out 10 titles. You say, I want blog posts about these 10 topics or 10 titles, and you essentially hit run, and I don't know, 30 seconds later, 3 minutes later, however long it takes to run, that is actually live sitting on your website for people to be able to read and peruse. That is why the API is so valuable, because you can actually make it an integral component of a much larger system that you will be creating. Now today, we're just going to be dealing with Python and the API itself, because much bigger systems. Yeah, not a class we're going to go into, but I think by the end of this, you'll have an understanding about how this API works, why it's so powerful and interesting, and why folks like me laugh at the normies that think that they're using AI when they just go and they start typing things into a text box and they think they're all special. So that's the class that we're going to be doing today. If you give me a second, we'll dive right in. Now, before I start explaining a lot of things to you, I think it's a good idea to give you a basic demonstration of what we're going to be working on today so that you can visualize the concepts that I'm talking about until we get to the point where I'm actually explaining the demonstration and explaining all the code. So let's go over to the computer for a second to look at a bit of demonstration code using the ChatGPT API so that you can understand what I'm talking about. So this is the kind of code we're going to be dealing with for the rest of today's class. If you're scared by this kind of code, trigger warning, you should probably leave now. So basically all of this is Python though. This is a Python script, and with this Python script, this allows us to access the ChatGPT API to be able to get a response. I'm not going to go over a lot of this. Again, we're going to talk about this more in depth as we go through the class. Again, I just basically want you to visualize what's going on here. So if we come down here, basically this is the heart of what makes all of this code work. This is where we're using a function from OpenAI, from ChatGPT, and basically we make a request of their system. What we're going to say is we give a role. We say what we want ChatGPT to be. And we say, you are a helpful assistant. You could say, you are Shakespeare. You could say, you're a professor. You could say, you are a police officer. Basically, this is where you say what character you want the AI to play. And then down this, under the user role, we simply plug in whatever question it is that we want a response to. So here I'll do something pretty simple. What is the radius of the Earth? Then basically we're going to get a response from this, and this is where we can print out the response on the screen. So what is the radius of the Earth? I can hit run up here. It runs this script. The radius of the Earth is approximately 6,371 kilometers, right? And with this, again, we can just simply change this to whatever we want. I don't know. What is the radius of Jupiter, right? Basically the same thing. We can then go through. Radius of Jupiter is approximately 69,911 kilometers. So this is what we're going to be dealing with today. And what makes this so cool is basically we can have this be a variable. So this question that we're asking of the system, it can be a variable value. So this can be fed in from a database, it can be fed in from a text box, it can be fed in from speech recognition, something like that. And then we get this response here. This is then just the response as text. Once this response comes back as text, we can dump this into a database. We can give this to a computer speech engine to turn text into speech, so we can have the computer actually talk to us. We could have this, have an if-else statement, and based off of certain things, different events can be triggered. All kinds of really cool, fancy things, but this is the basic idea of what we're going to be dealing with today. Now, the first thing to remind everybody whenever we start dealing with artificial intelligence is the fact that it's most likely not artificial intelligence. I have a buddy of mine that actually runs an AI and analyst firm, and I was talking to him a couple of years ago about all the AI products out there, and we were sitting there having a beer, and I was like, out of curiosity, how many of these products are actually AI? And he looked at me and he said, Eli, I don't think any of them actually are. I think this is kind of an interesting thing to be thinking about, though, whenever we deal with these products and whenever we say words such as artificial intelligence, the question really should be asked, what does that really mean? What are we expecting out of these systems? And is it reasonable to expect the things that we're expecting out of these systems, right? Because again, if you're going to deploy this, especially into a production environment, the results that you get from the computer system are going to be based off of how it's built and how it's designed and that type of thing. And if you design your system based off of the response you want and not the response that you're actually getting from the system, all hell is going to break loose at some point. I will warn you about that. So when we talk about things such as ChatGPT is something called a large language model. A large language model, basically what it does is it's been fed a tremendous amount of text, Library of Congress, apparently the entire internet, right? And basically what a large language model does is it goes through all of that text, it turns the text into something called tokens. It then figures out the statistical relationship between tokens. And so when you ask a large language model a question, what it's doing is it's actually trying to figure out statistical relationships between these things called tokens, and then it's giving you a token response that basically happens to get turned back into English. So when we talk about tokens, it's important to understand that a token is a word, a part of a word, or a symbol that has a numeric identifier within that large language model. And essentially all the large language model is doing is it's trying to figure out the probability that one token should follow another token. If I have these two tokens in a row, what is the thing that is what token is most likely to go after these two tokens that we have? What's the token most likely to go after that? Most likely to go after that? Most likely to go after that? So on and so forth. So it's very important to understand these large language models do not understand English. They're not actually intelligent. They're just doing statistical analysis at an insane speed. That's why they need all those NVIDIA GPUs. And don't you wish you had invested in NVIDIA a couple of years ago? So that's one of the things to be thinking about with this. And again, one of the important things with this large language model is all it's doing is a statistical analysis on tokens. So when you ask things like math questions, if you say 2 plus 2 or whatever else, if it has seen those numbers, if it has seen that equation in the past, it knows that statistically, 99.99% of the time, 2 plus 2 should equal 4. It is not doing math. It simply knows every time it's seen 2 plus 2 in the past, it's always been equal 4 after that, right? So that's one of the reasons they talk about large language models being quote unquote bad at math. And yes, they're horrible at math because they don't do math. That's why using one of these scripts that I'll be showing you today with using the API call can be very valuable, because many times if you know that the large language model can't actually do math itself, one of the things that you can ask it is you could dump a whole bunch of information into ChatGPT and you could say, can you please create an equation of what you think this data should look like, right? So imagine a word problem, a truck leaves Chicago going 500 miles an hour and a tsunami goes off in Tokyo. I don't know, what time should you eat lunch today or whatever, right? That type of thing, right? Imagine that. Well, since it's able to figure out the relationship between tokens, it may actually be able to give you back an equation, the type of equation that you need to solve the problem. And so you could get the response of the equation back and then have some kind of mathematical subsystem within your infrastructure, then do the actual math, because again, the LLM doesn't do math, to provide you the results that you're looking for. So one of the things, like when I look at these large language models, again, artificial intelligence, whatever, what I think of them as exceptional at something called regex, regular expression. So one of the issues that you run into in the coding world is if you're parsing data. So what parsing data means is that you read information coming into your system. It could be from user input, it could be from PDF files, could be from websites, whatever else. What you do is you create a script to read that data coming in and then pull out the specific information that you care about. Well, if you have information that's properly formatted in a standardized way, again, something like JSON. JSON is a data format. It's really easy to parse that information. If you're dealing with humans, right, especially in a world where we're digitizing everything, a lot of times the text that we get in is a complete and utter mess. And you as a coder trying to figure out how to parse a complete and utter mess can be a real pain in the butt. One of the cool things is you could just throw all of that mess up to ChatGPT and say, I need their first name, I need their last name, I need their social security number, and I need their email address. And it will look through all of that and it will say, here you go, right? So that's one of the things that makes, again, the large language models valuable, but it's important to understand both what they can do and absolutely what they can't. The other thing when you're dealing with ChatGPT is there's something called generative AI. And what this means is it actually creates the response as it goes. It's actually kind of cool now with the API. I'm going to show it to you in a bit. You can actually get the streaming. You can get the streaming feed from ChatGPT where it shows you how it's actually building out the response. So basically you ask a question and it tries to figure out what the first word of the answer is. And then once it has that, statistically, what should be the second word of the answer? Then it has those two words. What should be the third word of the answer? Fourth word, fifth word, sixth word, so on and so forth. And so it's actually building out, right? So when you go to Google, when you do a query on a database, it just simply provides you a response. You will always get the exact same response back. With this, it's always creating the answer new, which is cool from a technical standpoint, but can also run you into a bit of problems if, as it's giving you the new response every time. Basically, when Bob makes a query, it gives one response. When Sue does the exact same query 2 minutes later, it gives a slightly different response. When Patty does the same query a little bit later, it gives a completely different response. blase, blase, blase. So again, it's one of those things that can be technically cool, but can actually run you into some issues. And so that's one of the things with this API. Imagine if somebody asks a response or makes a request of ChatGPT, you get the response back. Now imagine if you take that response and then dump it into a database so that the next user in your system who asks the exact same question, or maybe slightly 90% of the same question, what if what happens first is you simply pull from the local database and say, oh, this question has already been asked. Is this the answer that you're looking for? So therefore, it's staying internal. You're not paying any prices. You're not doing anything like that. If it's not the right one, they can say, no, I want the AI response. If it is the right one, again, then you actually get a lot of value out of that. So these are some of the things to be thinking about when you're going to be using ChatGPT or any of these quote-unquote AI models or tools, and to really understand what's going on so that when you implement it within your system, you understand the response that you're going to be getting. Now, the next thing to talk about as a real technology professional, because we be real technology professionals here, is pricing, right? This is always funny when I talk with like noobs. Noobs never want to talk about terms of service or licensing schemes or pricing or any of that stuff. No, Eli, I just want to get straight to the functions. I want to get to lists and dictionaries and replication strategies. I want to do the cool stuff. It's like, yeah, well, bucko, most of our job is not the cool stuff. And if you want to keep your job, you'll make sure that the not cool stuff is done properly. So when we start talking about ChatGPT, they do have a pricing model, right? So normally when I use ChatGPT, I use something called the 3.5 turbo model, right? So when you start using ChatGPT, you're given different models that you can use. Currently, while I'm doing this video, ChatGPT 4 is the best model, and 3.5 Turbo is basically yesterday's model. The thing that you find out, though, when you start using these systems is the best model is a lot more expensive than yesterday's model, right? So when you're dealing with a ChatGPT 3.5, it basically costs you about 1/5 of a penny for 1,000 tokens. 1,000 tokens is supposedly somewhere around 750 words. Because again, remember when we talk about tokens are words, parts of words, or symbols. So when they do that math, you don't necessarily get 1,000 words. It's approximately 750 words. So when you're using the 3.5 Turbo model, it costs you about 1/5 of a penny, which is great. You max out initially at 4,000 tokens. So even if you do something really, really, really dumb, you're going to pay a penny. You're going to pay a penny. That's not too bad. Make it rain the pennies. The issue that you get to with ChatGPT 4 is that you can go up to 32,000 tokens. Isn't that a lot better, right? A lot of people will be like, wow, 32,000 tokens is so much better than 4,000 tokens. Why would I ever use 3.5? Well, here's the thing. It costs you anywhere between 6 cents to 12 cents per 1,000 tokens, which means, depending on what you're doing, you can spend $1.50 to almost $4 per request. Every time you click run, that might cost you $4. You don't even have to be in a production environment to realize that might get bad really damn quick. And so that's one of the reasons that I like using the 3.5 model, because basically it gives me the responses that generally I care about, especially doing these classes and those types of things, at a very, very low price point. The other thing to be thinking about too is once you start getting into the ChatGPT 4 model, where you can put up to 32,000 tokens, allowing you to use 32,000 tokens might allow you to be frankly stupid and waste a lot of your company's money. So we did the web scraping class at Silicon Dojo a little while ago. We will be doing the same class here in videos. But one of the interesting things that I found is so you can use a simple Python script to basically scrape literally all the text from a web page, send that up to ChatGPT, and ask, what is this article about, or whatever. Here's the interesting thing. When you scrape all the text from a web page and send it up to ChatGPT, all the text will end up being about 21,000 tokens. So you go to Ars Technica, you see a little article, little 500-600 word article, you send it up to ChatGPT, just full everything. It'll be 21,000 tokens, which, depending on how it works out with the pricing, will cost anywhere between like $1.20 to $1.80 simply for that one request. In all seriousness. But you're sitting there and you're like, well, but that doesn't make any sense, right? An 800-word blog post, why would it be 21,000 tokens? It would be 21,000 tokens because you're not thinking about all, and I do mean holy crap, all of the JavaScript, all of the CSS, all of the text that makes that web page be displayed properly for you that you just simply don't recognize because, again, it's often the source code, not in what you think you're seeing. And so, again, that's one of the things to be thinking about, too. Like with a for model, the for model allows you to be lazy, and in certain situations, that may make a lot of sense. But if every time you hit the run button, it costs you $1.20, again, just imagine, 1,000 users hitting your site or your platform every minute, times 60 minutes in an hour, times 24 hours in a day. And yes, this is basically how a startup company can burn through literally all of their money in the blink of an eye. I was talking to somebody about that earlier. Apparently there is a startup company that ran out of all their money because they didn't quite understand how this pricing system worked as far as ChatGPT was concerned. And so this is something to consider. When you're looking at using ChatGPT, again, we are going to be using 3.5 in almost everything today, just simply, again, because it costs me a penny every time it runs versus however much, ChatGPT 4 would cost us. And so this is something that you're going to have to consider. Okay, so are you still awake? I know that kind of stuff gets boring, but again, it's the boring stuff we get paid for. I want you to understand, as a real technology professional, if your job is exciting, you're doing it wrong. Have exciting hobbies. Have a boring job. I know for the 20-year-olds out there that sounds horrifying, but I'm telling you, that's how the real world works. So with that, let's go over to the computer. And once we go to the computer, what I want to do is I want to show you how to log into the dashboard that you're going to be using in order to get the ChatGPT, the API key, show you some of the information over within that dashboard and on their platform so you can get the API key. You can set a budget for your spend with ChatGPT so that you don't go over that budget. You don't do some kind of stupid while true loop and start burning $4 every time the damn thing triggers, right? Show you all that kind of stuff. So let's go over to the computer so a lot of this will make a lot more sense. So here we are at my computer. Again, pricing, just so you see it. If we come down here, it shows you the different models. It shows you some of the different context and the prices, right? So the 3.5 Turbo, and I really do have to say the 3.5 Turbo just works really, really, really well. And it is so inexpensive. So again, for 1,000 tokens, you now spend less than a fifth of a penny for 1,000 tokens if you're only doing 4,000 token context. So it's important to understand here with these prices. When we talk about tokens used, this is for both the request and the response. So when you ask a question or you upload something to ChatGPT, that's going to cost you tokens. And then when you get the response from ChatGPT, that is also going to cost you tokens. So you may upload a lot of information and then get a little response back, or you may basically say, hey, I want a 10,000 word booklet on God knows what, and then it will try to give you all of that back. But it's important to understand both sides of that transaction you will get billed for. So if you do 4,000 as a project or a request under 4,000 tokens, it'll cost you less than a fifth of a penny for the input, and it'll cost you a fifth of a penny for the output. So again, worst case scenario, you're getting billed literally 1 penny every time you hit the go button. If you go up to 16K context, so they now have this has just come around in the last little bit. So using the 3.5 model, you can actually use up to 16,000 tokens. Even with this, you're using a third of a penny for the input, and then you're using what, 40%, so slightly less than half of a penny for the output. So again, even with all of this, if you screw something up with a 16K context, I don't know, you're spending like 2 or 3 pennies. 2 or 3 pennies per mistake, which is awesome. If we come up here to the ChatGPT, if you use the 4 model, right, a lot, quote unquote, better, what you're going to see is it's 3 cents. So again, if you look down here, it's 0.0015, so less than a fifth of a penny. Here, it's 0.03. So it's 3 cents per 1,000 tokens on the input, 6 cents per 1,000 tokens on the output, and that's for 8,000 context, right? So if you use 8,000 tokens, it's going to cost you a little bit. If we come down here for the 32,000 context, what you're going to see is it's 6 cents for the input, and it's 12 cents for the output, right? So again, if you look at 32 times 12, what is that going to end up being? $3.60, $3.80. So again, depending on what you're asking of the system, that's where I'm saying, like, literally, it can end up costing you almost $4 every time you hit run, which is why things like caching and all that make so much sense. You have prices down here for things like fine-tuning models and embedding models. We'll talk about these in other classes, but again, I really just want to hammer this home for the umpteenth time. Okay, so in order to get to the API dashboard, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to openai.com, so not ChatGPT, openai.com. You're going to come here, you're either going to sign up or you're going to log in. I already have an account, so that brings us here, OpenAI. So ChatGPT, this is that platform that you're used to. So if I click on this, basically, again, this is the text box. I ask it a question. It gives me a response, right? As the normies do. That's not what we're doing. DALL-E, this is for images. We'll talk about that in a different class. Here is the API that we care about. So we can click on the API and it drops us into here. From here, there are some interesting things. They have examples. So the examples actually show you small demonstration projects. I do have to say they're kind of crappy, to be honest with you. Not the best examples, but they are examples. So they have the examples here. And then we have the API reference over here. And with the API reference, it will tell you basically how to install OpenAI onto your computer. So we're going to be using Python today. When you're using Python, you almost always have to install modules. So the module that we're going to have to install is, surprise, surprise, OpenAI. So this shows you how to do that. If you're using Node, it gives you the information here. We come down here, and then it's going to give us information on basically on how to do the request and what the responses look like for ChatGPT. When we come over here, so this is basically an example. So again, as you saw before, this is what the example looks like. From here, it'll show you the code for different models. So if I want to use the 16K version of Turbo, I can click on this, and then basically it just changes that there. If I want to use GPT-4, it shows me how the code gets modified, so on and so forth. It also is kind of interesting. You have the no streaming and the streaming. I'll show this to you further in the class. But here, so if you want the streaming, so what no streaming does is no streaming just gives you the full response. You make a request, it figures out what the response should be, and it sends you that response all at one go, which is frankly the way that you should do it. What streaming does, which is kind of cool, is basically as ChatGPT OpenAI is figuring out the answer, it's generating the response, it literally sends you the words as it's generating the response. This is the code for how to do that, which again is kind of interesting from an interactivity standpoint. Is kind of interesting. Generally, I probably wouldn't use it, but I will show you how to deal with that today. But anyways, here we got all kinds of things: completions and embeddings. Again, images. When we do classes on images, all of this information is here. So what you're going to want to do is go under API reference chat, and then kind of scroll down here until you get to the chat completion, and this will give you the code if you need examples of the code. Again, click on no streaming, and generally just do 3.5 turbo. Then you can just copy Python, Node, curl if you want to use it. Okay, then for the account itself. So we're going to come up here, and basically with this, it gives my my account name, which will get deleted out of this video. I can manage the account. I can view my API keys. So one of the things I'll do now is click on the view the API keys, and this is where my API keys are stored. Now you'll notice once an API key is created, I will not see it in plain text again. So basically you give the key a name, you copy the key when it gets created, and then you save it somewhere else because you will not be able to see it again. If you want a new API key, so the API keys that we'll be using today, you can do create new secret key, and I can say, for class, I do create secret key, and this is the API key. At this point in time, you must copy out this API key and put it somewhere else, because as soon as I hit done, I get for class, and again, I get the last digits or characters so that I know what key is what. But beyond that, I can't actually see that key again. You can delete keys. So to delete a key, all I have to do is click on this. I can revoke the key, and the key is gone, but that's all you get to do. You create the key, you copy the key, and when you need to, you delete the key. That's about it. When you come up here, again, rate limits, something important to be thinking about if this is in a production environment. This shows you tokens per minute that you can use, and responses per minute. So for 3.5 turbo, you can use up to 90,000 tokens per minute and get 3,500 responses per minute. Down with GPT-4, it's 10,000 tokens per minute and 200 responses per minute. So again, depending on what your system is doing, only being able to get 200 responses per minute might actually be a major limiting factor for what you're doing. So again, just things to be thinking about. Our projects does not matter. Beyond that, I can come down here to billing, and the most important thing with billing is setting your usage limits. So you click on usage limits. I have a hard limit of $10. When your organization reaches this threshold each month, subsequent requests will be rejected. So even if somebody does a while true loop, even if somebody steals my API key, I will not be out any more than $10. Soft limit, when I reach this limit, I get a notification email just so I know what's going on. So when you start playing with this, give yourself a hard limit. And again, make it $5 or $10, especially if you're using the 3.5 model. You really don't use very much. It doesn't cost you very much. So this will keep you from doing anything particularly stupid. So this is basically the back end for how you deal with ChatGPT for the API. The big thing is for you to get your API key so that you can then use this in the projects and the demonstrations that I'm going to be showing you coming up. So now that we have the boring stuff out of the way, let's dive into this code so I can explain to you what's going on so that you can start writing some code yourself for whatever projects that you have going on. So we're going to go over to my demonstration computer. So at Silicon Dojo, basically our lab computers are all Ubuntu. So I think Ubuntu desktop using VS Code is the best way to go. Don't tell Louis Rossman this. But we actually use old MacBook Pros. We basically take MacBook Pros, we install Ubuntu Desktop onto them, and they work fabulously. Great hardware that's incredibly cheap because, again, we use 10 or 11-year-old MacBook Pros with a brand new operating system in VS Code. Again, it actually works very well for us. So if you're sitting down at your computer, whether it's Windows, whether it's Mac, whatever else, and you start to code, some things might be slightly different for you, but in today's class, it basically should be all the same. When I sit here thinking about it, there's nothing with the operating system or anything else. Whatever platform you run this code on should work good for you. So anyways, with that, let's go over to the computer so I can show you how to start playing with the code. So the first thing that you're going to have to do before you start playing with the API is you do need to install the OpenAI module. So again, this is a Python module. So with Python, you use pip. So being Ubuntu, we use pip3 install OpenAI. And so basically, when you run this command, it will go up to the repository. It will pull down the OpenAI module, and then now you'll be able to use OpenAI on your system. If you create the code that I'm showing you today and it fails out because it doesn't know what the hell the OpenAI module is, it's because you have not actually installed it. Now again, depending on your operating system version or configurations, you will either use pip or pip3. Pip was for version 2 of Python. Pip3 is for version 3 of Python, but you can change how your computer responds to commands. So anyways, on the latest version of Ubuntu Desktop, use pip3. If this doesn't work for you, use pip. And if that doesn't work for you, I don't know, go to ChatGPT and ask it why it doesn't work. Anywho, with that, let's go over and actually take a look at some code. So this is our first project, OpenAI-NoStream.py. So what this is going to do is it is going to simply get the response from OpenAI and then give us the entire response once it has it. Now it is important to understand if you start asking for a long response, so 500 words, 10,000 words, something like that, it may take a long time for OpenAI to respond to you, which is one of the reasons why you might want that streaming to come back so you know it's actually doing something. But for small responses, it won't be any big deal. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to import OpenAI. So again, every time you do anything in Python, you have to import a module. Even to get a random number, you have to import a module. So you import the OpenAI module. Then you're going to feed OpenAI the API key. So this is normally done as an operating system environment variable. I'm just putting this here with the entire API key because it's a lot easier to deal with many times. And again, this API key will get deleted right after I do this class, but the environment variable is the more secure way of doing it. But anyways, basically you just feed it the API key. Then we have this completion equals. So completion equals, so basically this is where we're going to make a response of OpenAI, and then that response is then going to be completion. So OpenAI chat completion create. Here's where we say the model. So if we want to use GPT-4 or GPT 3.5, 16K, or whatever else, this is where we would modify that. And then we have messages here. And with this, we have different roles, right? So we have role system, we have role user, and then you can have role assistant. We'll deal with role assistant in a second. So with these, basically what the system role is the system role is what character will this artificial intelligence be? Will this be the President of the United States? Will this be Shakespeare? Will this be Professor? Will this be Tiny Tim? Basically, what is the voice you want this AI to respond in? So here you are a helpful assistant. So this can be useful again if you're making blog posts, to say make it a journalist. You are a journalist. If you're trying to do some kind of press release, maybe you are a politician, right? And it'll change the words slightly. Then to come down here, we have role user, and so role user is where you ask the question. What question is it that you're going to ask? So for this is what is the radius of the Earth? Between the role system and the role user, you can have role assistant that I'll show you a bit later, and you can have as many assistant roles as you want, and this guides the response. So you could say, I want a 500-word blog post. I want certain things in there. Basically, you can put numerous assistant roles in there to guide what the response is going to look like. So system role, you get one because there's only one character that the system will play. User role, you only get one because that is the question that you're going to be asking. Then the assistant roles, you can have as many as you want. Then we get the completion. The completion is going to come back as something called JSON format, right? So again, when I was talking before about something that is easy to parse, and JSON format is easy to parse, right? It comes back in a format that's easy to understand so that you can get the response that you care about, the actual information that you care about. So right now, all I'm going to do is print out that entire JSON response. So what is the radius of the Earth? I'm going to click on this. It's going to take a second. And then we get this beast of a response. Well, this isn't too bad because, the answer isn't too much, right? So with here, basically with this JSON response, the ID, so basically the identifier for this particular request, it was created at this particular time with this particular model. Then we come down here and we get the content. So the radius of the Earth is approximately 6,371 kilometers. Why did it finish? It finished because it got to the end. So this is something you may need to look at. So finish reason, like you may have run out of tokens. So that can be a big problem when I was first messing with this, is sometimes you'll get like half a response back and you're like, I don't understand. It's half a blog post, right? Because it's generating, it's generative AI. So it wrote half the blog post and stopped in the middle. And you look at the finish reason, and it's basically it ran out of tokens. Like, oh, okay, I need to figure out how to deal with that, right? So if you see finish reason stop, it meant it went through how it was supposed to, and so that you're getting the answer that you're supposed to get. If you have a different, finish reason here, you may want to take a look at what's going on. We can come down here for the tokens. So again, it's important for you to keep track of tokens, especially for your boss, right? So prompt tokens, basically how many tokens, were uploaded to the system. So this was 24 tokens. Completion tokens, the tokens for the completion. So for this, it was 18 tokens. So total tokens used is 42 tokens. And so this is very useful for you too, especially from a logging vantage point with your systems. You can log basically how many tokens are being used in near real time to verify that you're not going over budget, to adjust things, so on and so forth, right? So anyway, so this is the response that we're getting back. Now we took a look at this response. What do we actually want here? We just want content, right? And so if we come and we look at what I had I commented out here. This is what will give us just what we want, right? I'm horrible with my keyboard, right? So with this, so completion. So the completion is the variable that we get back. And then we have choices. So completion.choices. So at index choices, so completion index choices. Then we see that we have a bracket, right? So in the Python world, whenever you have a squiggly bracket, that's a dictionary. So it's a named index. So squiggly bracket choices is the named index. Whenever you have a square bracket, that's a list. So list just has numbered indexes. So we see the opening square bracket. We then see a squiggly bracket right after it. So we know that this is index 0. So index 0. Then we come down here to named index, again, message. So that's where we see message. And then we come down here to content and basically content. So this is going to go to completion, choices, index 0, message, content, and it is only going to print that out. If I come down here, type clear, just so the screen is clear, and then I run the same script again. Now, I literally will only now get that response, and so I can send that to the user in a web form, do whatever else to it, but that's how you access just the response. So now this is a version of the code like I showed you, but it is actually going to stream the response to you. So instead of collecting the entire response and sending it to you at one go, basically as the large language model is generating the response, the words are going to come in. Again, with this, I think it's good as a party trick for your users if you want to make it look cool, your system look cool. Or this might actually be useful if you're getting a massive response from ChatGPT. So imagine you ask for a 10,000 word blog post or something like that. That'll take a while for ChatGPT to create. And so by having the completion come in as a stream, that might be useful for you just to verify the system didn't lock up, that type of deal. But generally, I would probably stay away from this unless I needed it. But it's here. I'll show it to you because it's kind of cool. So with this, again, you import OpenAI like you did before. You have the API key like you did before. And we have the completion, essentially like we had before. So again, I'm using the 3.5 Turbo because I don't want to get billed a lot of money. We come down to the roles. System, you are a helpful assistant. Role user. How many chuck can a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? So I actually like this because it'll in the response, it will show you the tokens thing. Again, where tokens are not words, right? This will actually make sense when I show you what the response is. Past that, we're now going to add stream equals true. So we did not have that before. Then coming down here, we're going to have a for loop or a for-x loop in order to run through completion. So as completion is coming in, we're going to print out what comes in. So for chunk, so we just simply call this whatever we want. We're going to call it chunk. For chunk in completion. So completion is what is coming in. Then we're turning it into a chunk. We're then going to say print chunk, index choices, index 0, index delta, print out what is there. So when we do that, and I hit the go button, basically what you see how this is coming in as a stream. So instead of it coming in as one just solid response, it's now coming in as the stream so we can see what's going on. Why I like this whole woodchuck thing is it also shows you that it's not entire words are coming in, right? CH, uck. So it knows it's supposed to have CH. And statistically, with the words that have come before, uck should be after ch. So the response is ch with uck without any space. That's not the same as the word chuck as far as a computer is concerned, right? So again, it's important for you to be kind of considering this, when you're dealing with these systems to really grasp what they're trying to do. Past that, one of the things that we can do is we see that this is index content, right? So if we come here, right, so chunk choice is 0 dot delta, what I can do is dot content here. And so with the dot content here, it is now simply going to print out the value in content. So with this, there will be a small error at the end because I don't want to get into a whole if-else statement. But basically, it'll just print out the words for us and then error out. When I hit the run, now we see... right? Then it failed at the end, but whatever. So a woodchuck could chuck as much wood as a woodchuck would chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood. So we get all these words. But then that's also going to be something for you to be thinking about is how do you deal with this stream as it's coming in? Because remember, you as a computer professional, simply getting this response is not good enough. You're going to have to figure then out how to turn this into some kind of data that the user is going to care about, right? Does it get dumped to a database? How does it get printed out onto a computer screen? That type of deal. So basically, this kind of gives you the idea, though, of how the stream works. So now here is the final demo, right? So this is going to show you why the internet is about to go to hell. The internet, I don't know what is worse than a dumpster fire. So if the internet's currently a dumpster fire, it's going to get even worse, right? So you've probably heard from all the SEO marketers out there. They've been trying to figure out how to pay the rent, and they've realized AI marketing is the way to go, right? They used to SEO optimize all these web pages, and that turned the internet into a disaster. And so now the idea is, hey, why don't we have artificial intelligence write blog posts? Why pay Bangladeshis 50 cents per blog post and spam the internet that way when we can pay ChatGPT a penny a literal penny per blog post and really customize how we're going to spam the hell out of the internet. And basically, our little script here is going to create a little Autoblog for us. So when we finish this script, we are going to write literally to a web page. So there's going to be autoblog.html. We're going to write to this web page, and we're going to be able to open up in Firefox, and we will see a web page. Now, normally, again, if you're in the real production environment, the responses that are coming back, you would want to dump into a database system. So if you're using WordPress, something like that, you would dump it into the MySQL database or Postgres or whatever you have on the back end. With this, we're simply just going to be writing to a file because we're not going to get into all that mess today. So anyways, with this, we import the OpenAI module as we did before. We have the API key as we did before. And this is where we create a list of titles, right? So I want 3 different blog posts written, and me being me, they're just kind of snarky. Why fish run? And it is interesting. ChatGPT will tell you why fish run, why cats fly, and why bats swim. So what's going to happen is we're going to iterate through this title list, and it is literally going to create a blog post for each of these. We're going to come down here. We're going to create a file. We're going to call it Autoblog, open autoblog.html, A+. So what this means is we're either going to append it to the file or we're going to create the file if it does not currently exist. Then we're going to do that for-x loop that I talked about before. So for every item in the title list, we are going to go through this loop down here all the way down to this file right. So completion looks like how we had it before. OpenAI, chat completion, create. Model looks like how we had before. And down here, it's very similar, right? So role, system, content. You are a journalist. So I want you to do this in the voice of a journalist. Oh, remember when you trusted journalists? Anyways, that's another show. Then here we have the role of a system. So you can only have one system role. You can only have one user role, but you can actually have many assistant roles. For this, I'm just going to use one role because that just makes my life easier. And so with this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to restrict this to a 250-word blog post. So you do have to be careful with this. If you don't put an assistant here, it may give you an insanely long post, or it'll give you an insanely short post. And so you have to think about basically how many words do you want this thing to respond to you. And it'll be horseshoes and hand grenades. You know, you might get 200 words, you might get 240 words, you might get 150 words. But basically, you're just giving it a limit here. This can be very useful, again, for Silicon Dojo. We did a class last night where we're using AI with speech, so text to speech. And so with that whole system, you get the text back from OpenAI, but then you actually have to process that text and turn it into an audio file, and then you have to play that audio file. So if the response is long, right, the longer the response, the longer it's going to take to process, you can have a lot of lag. So that's one thing to be thinking about with this assistant. You need 250 words, you need 500 words, maybe 10 words, maybe 25 words, maybe, whatever, 2 sentences. You can put all that kind of stuff in here. On top of that, when you're doing this, let's say if you want a list of information back, so you say, I want this in a Python list, and then you could have additional assistants, and those additional assistants will say, the format should look like this, the naming convention should be this. Blase, blase, blase. So anyways, that's the kind of stuff you can do with assistants that you can play with. Then we come down here to role, user, and content. You'll notice no quotation marks, You just put X. So X is the item, so this is the variable. So basically we're just putting the variable in, so every time it loops through, it will put one of those titles in, and then it'll spit it out. Then we're going to come down here, we're going to print the title out onto the console screen just so we see what it is. Then we're going to print out the actual response onto this screen so we can verify that it's there. Then we have reply equals the response. So all I want is the text coming back from ChatGPT, so that's what we're going to have reply here. Then what we're going to do down here is we're actually going to format the text and HTML tags. So when this comes back, it'll have next lines. So it'll have /ns. So whenever you're dealing with Python, something to keep in mind, or any programming language, is the formatting of the text. So HTML uses tags, p tags, h1 tags, that type of thing for formatting. Normal text, so ASCII text, uses /t/n. So /t is tabs, /n is next line. That's how it deals with formatting. So basically what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have reply. So this reply is going to come back, and in it there's going to be next lines. And so what I'm going to say is I want to split reply whenever there's a next line. So we're going to have a list, that's reply, that will take the original reply and split that string. It'll be a string, split it on the next line into the different values within a list. We're going to have post. So post is what's going to get written to the HTML web page. And then for y in reply. So reply is now a list. So for each item in the list, we are going to have post. So we want the entire thing. So post is going to equal f string, whatever was in post before, plus y within p tags. So what this is going to do is anything that had a next line character before, this essentially is just going to wrap it within p tags, and that's going to be assigned the value for post. And so what we're doing here is whatever came previously, add to that, this line with p tags around it. Then we're going to do file.write. And this is for each one. So X is the title. Within the H1 tags, we're going to put the title, and then we're going to put the entire post. And then once we get to the end of this whole massive thing, we are going to close. So with this, I can now hit go. So it's going to go, and it's running, and it's running. So with this, it'll take a minute, because again, it's doing 3 different posts. So it might actually take a couple of seconds to do this. Okay, so that is the first post there. So why fish run? And then it gives us why fish run. Okay, so that's the second post there. Why cats fly? And it gave us why cats fly. Have you ever seen a cat fly? No, I don't mean in an airplane or helicopter. I'm talking about cat taking the sky on its own, gracefully soaring through the air. Anywho, and if we scroll down, it has finished. Why bats swim? One might think bats are exclusively aerial creatures. But anyway, so what you'll notice here, see, these are the next lines, right? So this is coming back as ASCII text, and we're getting the next lines. If I simply wrote this to an HTML web page as it is, it would be one really, really, really long line, and it would be worthless. But because we put everything within the P tags and the H tags, we can now get a web page. So I double click on this, and as we can see, why fish run, why cats fly, blase, blase. And again, you can see that this is actually a web page, and so the text readjusts itself as you change the size of the screen. So why fish run? Although fish are primarily adapted for life in water, there are certain species like mud skippers and walking catfish. Blah blah. Why cats fly? Additionally, cats have a unique skeletal structure that enable them to rotate their bodies mid-air. And why bats swim? So again, imagine when the SEO experts out there start understanding how to use this API. Literally imagine when you could write an entire blog, not a blog post, right? Not a post. Imagine when you could write 1,000 post blog literally every hour, something along those lines. Imagine when those SEO marketers start getting the Bangladeshis not to write 20 blog posts per day, but imagine when they start publishing 20 entire blogs with 1,000 posts each per day. That is the power of being able to use the API and what it can do. So there you go. Now you know how to use the ChatGPT API. Again, what I showed you today works with a 3.5, works with a 4, works with the 8K, model, the 32K model, the whole 9 yards. Essentially, all you do is you just change where that model is into which model you want to use. Just do remember, once you start using the 4K model, it's gonna start costing you a little bit of money. So do be very careful about that. Again, what I think is really exciting about this is being able to use the API. You can now make this an integral component into whatever system that you're going to be creating. Again, so many folks right now, they're using the crappy ChatGPT interface and, oh, yay, I'm using AI. Who the hell cares? Great. You're using sort of a better version of Google, depending on how you define it. But again, it's not really that interesting. Oh, yay, you can have it create an agenda for your next meeting. Oh, yay, you can have it create a marketing plan. Normies think that kind of stuff is exciting. Not so interesting as far as I am concerned. What's really cool with this API is you can now make ChatGPT, you can make OpenAI an integral component into your projects so that you can do a lot more interesting things. Again, imagine when we talk about emails, right? So many times when they talk about AI right now, AI can write emails. And so somebody plugs some information in, they get a response, they copy, paste, yay, whoopee crap. Who cares, right? What I think is more interesting is imagine if you have some kind of alerting system for your infrastructure, environmental controls, right? You have all kinds of stuff going on, right? So whether a water sensor trips, whether a CPU goes over 100%, all of that kind of stuff. Now imagine you code out your notification system for who's supposed to be communicated with, at what times, that type of issue. One of the problems that you can run into is essentially how do you give your administrators or your end users information that they understand and they can read, fairly reasonably. What's cool about this with ChatGPT is you could actually dump a whole bunch of information into a request, and you could say, hey, turn this into some human readable format that's easier to understand, and it can spit out a very concise little email alert. So imagine if you were, again, CPU fans or whatever going off, and so you can say, turn this information into an email. Then once it sends that response back to you, you then take that response, you then use SendGrid or whatever email service provider you're using to then automatically send the email out to the appropriate person. Again, imagine if you have issues going on with your system and you want to send a text message, right? SMS text message. You go up to ChatGPT, you say, turn this into something more human readable, and then you use Twilio to send out a text message. Or again, even something like a phone call. Send a phone call. You can use text, so OpenAI gives you back the text. You can use some kind of text-to-speech module with Python or whatever else to turn that text into a voice thing. And so somebody picks up the phone, and then they can have essentially this computer talking to them, telling them what's going on, right? That I think, again, is cool. Imagine that kind of thing being done. Again, you can have ChatGPT make decisions. We're going to have a class on this coming up. I have to create it. But what's interesting is, right, it doesn't really make decisions, doesn't really understand how decisions work. Again, it's not actually intelligence, but it does, again, understand statistical relationships. So what's kind of interesting is you can actually use it for a rudimentary brain for your system. So like in our class, we're going to do things like play tic-tac-toe or play simple games. So basically, you can feed it what your game looks like. You can feed it previous moves, and then you can ask it which move it would like to make, and then it does a little statistical analysis, and then it gives you a move back, right? That is where you can use ChatGPT or OpenAI to start making decisions. Again, one of the things I want to play with, don't quote me on this. If it doesn't work, don't blame me. Again, I'm really interested in IoT, like little robots and that type of thing. And so one of the issues you get into with moving robots around, let's say you're doing lawn mowing or vacuum cleaning or that kind of thing, is essentially you have this room and then trying to figure out the best route to go to, whenever your little vehicle needs to turn around. Well, if you turn your room or if you turn your environment essentially into an array, a very, very large array, one of the questions is then could you just send that array up with a basic understanding of how your robot works and then have ChatGPT figure out the code? Oh my God, guidance systems for robots are a pain in the ass. ChatGPT, you do it. Right? Again, a couple of lines of ChatGPT code might save you like weeks of trying to figure that crap out on your own. So again, that's some of the interesting stuff that can be done. Again, feeding in all kinds of like weather information. Again, pulling in from the weather API, pulling in from your calendar, different things. So like imagine, so everybody wants to work from home now, and the point to work from home is so that you can do cool stuff. So let's say you want to do a hike, right? So it's like, oh, I really want to do this hike. I'm not sure when I'll be able to do this hike. Imagine coming up with a system that pulls in from your Google Calendar, pulls in from the weather API, pulls in some other information, and basically you just put in what day or when should I do this hike? And it sees everything, it figures everything out, does little statistics, and says, oh, Thursday afternoon, you should do the hike. Right? That's some of the kind of cool stuff that you can do. And again, pulling in from information from other APIs, other data sources, I think is really, really kind of interesting and should be fun to play with. So anyways, that's all we got for the class today. Again, be careful. Be careful. It can get expensive. Do be careful. I will remind you, Model 4, ChatGPT Model 4 can cost you almost $4 every time you run it if you do something stupid. If you put that into a while true loop, you can become poor really, really quickly. Be careful about this. I know we bring this kind of stuff up, but this is why things like architecture is so important. So I know in the modern world with a lot of programmers, they don't really think about architecture a lot. Again, things like default gateways and all that kind of stuff seems so antiquated, right? Public cloud versus private cloud, all that kind of stuff. Oh, that's not what developers worry about. But they should, because again, with these systems and with the price point of these systems, sometimes just a little bit, just a teeny tiny little bit of architecture design might save your company a metric crap ton of money. And remember, when your company runs out of money, you no longer have a job. That's the whole thing. Like a lot of modern programmers, like they like to be activists. Like they protest their own company, which is as it is. Here's the thing: when you protest your company and your company has a lot of money, they can make the decision about whether they're going to keep you, whether they're going to fire you. If your company runs out of money, yeah, protest all you want. There's no money for you. Oh, you want a severance package? Well, you should have thought about that before you did the while true loop on a GPT-4 model. That's where your severance package went, and your buddy's severance package, and your boss's severance package. Again, $4 per request is brutal. So anyways, as always, I enjoy teaching this class, and look forward to seeing you at the next one.